I had been hunting this trail for years, peaceful, quiet, and full of promise. But one day, everything changed. As I approached my usual spot, I was shocked to find a thick fence blocking my way. At first, I thought it was just another property dispute, but this time something felt off. I'm no stranger to local property lines, but this was different. The fence wasn't just any barrier. It felt like something bigger was at play. As I started to investigate, I stumbled onto a massive surprise. I was standing in the middle of a federal wildlife corridor, and it wasn't just a simple fence. There was surveillance everywhere. Cameras, motion sensors, things I'd never seen before. It hit me hard. I had no idea I was hunting in such a protected area. But what really set the alarm bells ringing? I wasn't the only one who'd noticed. The locals had been talking, and the story behind this Karen and her sudden fencing off of the trail was more than I bargained for. I had to know why this trail was suddenly restricted and what was really going on behind the surveillance cameras. But little did I know, I was about to get pulled into something much bigger than I ever imagined. As I stood there, staring at the fence, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It wasn't just the cameras, there was something in the air that felt off. I'd been hunting in these woods for years. I knew the lay of the land like the back of my hand. But now I was faced with an unfamiliar territory, one I didn't have the right to step into without some serious consequences. Word around town had been strange lately. There were whispers about Karen, the woman who had recently moved into the cabin near the trailhead. She wasn't exactly friendly, always keeping to herself, but now it seemed she had taken a very personal interest in the trail I frequented. It didn't make sense. Why would she fence off a public hunting area? And why the heavy surveillance? I started to dig deeper. Turns out, this area had been designated as a federal wildlife corridor years ago, but it wasn't widely known. The government had stepped in to protect the local wildlife and preserve the land, but no one had ever really enforced the boundaries. Now, Karen's sudden action was making everyone question whether there was something else going on. Could she be working with someone? Or was she just a pawn in a much larger game? The more I uncovered, the less I knew who to trust. The more I tried to figure out what Karen was up to, the more I felt like I was digging myself into a hole. There were rumors that she had ties to some higher-ups, but nothing concrete. People who had lived here their whole lives were beginning to whisper about strange happenings in the woods. Some said they had seen unmarked trucks parked near the fence at odd hours. Others swore they saw figures lurking in the shadows, watching from a distance, but no one could say for sure what was really going on. I started talking to the locals, but most of them weren't willing to get involved. They were either scared of Karen or too wrapped up in their own lives to care. But one night, I met an old man named Jack at the local diner. He'd lived here longer than anyone, and he knew the woods like the back of his hand. He leaned in close, lowering his voice, like he was about to reveal a secret. "They've been coming through here for years," Jack said, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "The government, the contractors, whoever they are, they've been making moves. But now, with Karen getting involved, something's changed. It's not just about the wildlife anymore." I was left with more questions than answers. What did he mean? Who was they? The sudden tension in Jack's voice made me realize this was bigger than just some fence and cameras. It felt like we were all being pushed into a game we didn't understand, and I was stuck in the middle of it. The more I dug, the more the pieces didn't seem to fit. That night, I decided to get closer to the fence to see if I could find something, anything, that would give me answers. The surveillance cameras were everywhere, their red lights blinking in the dark like eyes in the shadows. It felt like I was being tracked with every step I took. The air was thick, the silence unsettling. Every twig that snapped underfoot seemed louder than the last. I had my suspicions, but tonight, I was determined to find out what was really going on. As I approached the fence, I saw a shadow move. My heart raced. Someone, or something, was out there. I crouched low, my breath shallow, trying not to make a sound. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, but I couldn't. Not now, Not when I was so close. Suddenly, a voice broke through the stillness. It wasn't Karen's. It wasn't anyone I knew. "You shouldn't be here," the voice hissed. My pulse spiked, but I couldn't move. I stayed perfectly still, praying the darkness would hide me. From the shadows emerged a figure, tall and cloaked, their face hidden in the blackness. I could feel the weight of their stare, the intensity of their presence. My mind raced. Was this person working with Karen? Or was this the they Jack had warned me about? Before I could react, the figure turned and disappeared into the woods, leaving me frozen in place, caught between the urge to follow and the fear of what might be lurking ahead. I stood there, trying to shake off the feeling that I was being played, that every step I took was exactly what they wanted. My heart hammered in my chest, and I took a few shaky steps back toward the trail. But then something caught my eye. A faint glow from the corner of the woods. It was too bright to be natural, too consistent. It wasn't just a random flashlight, but the steady, eerie light of something much larger. My curiosity got the best of me. Slowly, cautiously, I moved toward it, my every sense on high alert. As I got closer, I realized it wasn't just a light. It was coming from a large, camouflaged tent set up deep in the trees, hidden from the main path. The structure was covered in netting, and I could just make out several figures moving around inside. I froze. What the hell was this? The more I looked, the more the pieces of the puzzle seemed to scatter in all directions. I reached for my phone to snap a picture, but as soon as I pulled it out, I heard a rustling behind me. My heart stopped. There was no time to hide or run. Someone was coming. I turned to find a man standing in front of me, his face covered by a mask. The moment he saw me, he raised a hand, signaling for me to stay quiet. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and urgent. "This is bigger than you think. And Karen, she's just the beginning." The weight of his words hit me like a punch. My mind raced. Who was this guy? And what did he know? It was clear now. I had unwittingly stumbled into something far darker than a simple land dispute. But the real question was, how much of it could I survive to uncover? The man took a step closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "You don't understand what's really happening here," he said, his tone urgent but controlled. "Karen's not just some isolated landowner. She's part of something much bigger, something dangerous, and you've already gotten too close." I felt the weight of his words settling over me. My stomach churned. Everything had seemed so random at first, just an annoying fence and strange surveillance. But now it was clear. There were bigger forces at play. Before I could ask another question, he motioned for me to follow him into the tent. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, thick with secrecy. The figures I had seen were a mix of military types and civilians, all huddled around a table, deep in conversation. At the center of it all was a series of maps, charts, and redacted documents. It was like stepping into a covert operation. The man, who introduced himself as Ben, sat me down. "What you're looking at is a planned project to turn this whole region into a government-controlled zone. Not for wildlife, but for something much more profitable. They're using Karen to keep an eye on this place while they make their moves. The surveillance is just the beginning." I tried to process the enormity of what he was saying, but before I could speak, the sound of a distant engine echoed through the trees. Ben's face tightened. "They're here." Panic surged in my chest. I had to make a choice. Leave now and risk everything I had learned being buried, or stay and uncover the truth once and for all. But as I stood up to act, a voice from outside the tent froze me in place. "Ben," the voice said, cold and calm. "It's time." My heart sank as the realization hit me. The person on the other side of the tent wasn't here to protect me. They were here to make sure I never left. I turned to Ben for help, but he was already backing away, a look of regret on his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "You were never meant to get this far." In that moment, I understood. The real game had just begun, and I was now trapped in a web much bigger than I could have ever imagined. I barely had time to react before the tent flap flew open and two men in tactical gear stepped inside. One of them locked eyes with me, his face expressionless. The other spoke coldly, "You're coming with us." Ben, his face filled with regret, made no move to stop them. "There's nothing more I can do," he muttered under his breath, his voice a mix of guilt and resignation. I looked back at him, trying to understand, but there was no time for more questions.